Okay. Sorry about last week. Hopefully everybody's okay. I see dryness behind you. Nobody's ceilings falling. No water floating. Nobody's doing this. That's a good thing. So we're dividing this into two sessions, one today, and then I just got the okay for Friday. And the session is really 5 parts. Normally when I give it live, I involve every one of you because it's a different kind of session than all the other sessions you're going to take or you have taken. And I see always that you learn the most or get out of it the most when we all interact and share our stories. And this is the next series, which is 5 presentations. They start with burnout and we'll go through them. They're really about you. So when something is about you, hopefully you'll be able to join. And again, once I start the presentation, you're going to see me do this time and time again because I have you on the other laptop so I can interact. So if you don't have any questions, we can start. And if you do, just feel free to raise your hand, send it in the chat. And if I don't see it, just do something to grab my attention, okay? Now, all right. Let me share my screen. And let's do that. Okay. Let me do this. I'm preparing you on the other side. So I can see everybody. Okay. All right. Can you all see the presentation? Do I have thumbs up? Okay, good. Now in this presentation, there are 3 or 4 videos that I'm going to be playing, and hopefully everything works and technology works and you'll be able to hear them. Some videos to show to drive the message through. Before I start, a show of hands of who thinks they're burnt out. 2, 3. This is a very brave class. I've got 3 out of 12 or 13. That's pretty impressive because I usually get crickets. Nobody raises their hand like, I'm good, I'm not burned out, I'm fine. I'm falling apart, but I'm fine. Okay. Louis raised her hand. Where's Louis?
Hi.
Hey, Louis. Hi. Welcome. All right. So as I was telling everybody, you're going to see me move back and forth. I just have 2 screens. So why are you guys here, and why is it important to learn about burnout? Well, if I had to ask each and every one of you why you joined medicine, why you wanted to become a doctor, what would be your response? I'll take any response. First thing comes to your mind when I'd ask you, why did you become a doctor? Don't all unmute at the same time.
Wanted to help people.
Thank you. It's to help people. How many do I see a show of yes with that? Any other reason why?
It's a family
Job
tradition.
security.
Family tradition. Okay. Louis, we were saying?
Job security.
Job security. Okay. If you had to put help, family tradition, job security as far as importance, which one would be the first one? Help, maybe?
Job
Okay.
security.
Job security for Louis. Okay, I got you. So Louis represents about 5 to 10% of why physicians end up being doctors. And Ayana and everybody else, as far as priorities is concerned, represent 90% of everybody else. There are many things to quote, and you'll see that I use a lot of quotes in my presentation because I have to drive my message through, like I said. But medicine arose out of the primal sympathy of man with man, out of the desire to help those in sorrow, need, and sickness. Now I highlight desire to help, and then I highlight primal sympathy because that is at the core of some of the things we talk about with burnout. That'll be the first part of our presentation. The second part will be about what burnout does and the impact of burnout. And I hopefully you'll agree with me that the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. The third part is how do we deal with it and what do we have to do? And I also hope you agree that life does not get easier or more forgiving. We get stronger and more resilient. If anybody has a doubt, just look at COVID and the snow last week. Okay? Nobody gave us a break. We had to do something about it. And that's pretty much medicine as we know it. And then when I'm done, we'll go back to that primal sympathy. And this will be the first part of the presentation to be about burnout. Now, if you take nothing out of everything that I'm going to talk about for the next 5 hours, remember that all of what we are talking about is about one thing, change. Keep that in mind, okay? All right. Please excuse my friend, he will be interrupting our slides every now and then. Now, if we talk about change, if you look at burnout, and you look at the literature, it'll say that 80% of things that lead to burnout are what they call antecedent factors, factors outside the control of the physician. And if you look at this wonderful chart, most people attacking burnout are trying to start from top, the public policy, and then go down to the community and what can we do institutional and interpersonal and then on individual. 20% of burnout are due to factors that are under the control of the physician and innate, is what the literature says. Now, I've been doing research and working for the better part of 7 years on most of the time, I'm focusing on the individual, on the 20%, but I have been able to touch the other part. And for the rest of the presentation, I want you to know that we're going to be focusing on you, the individual. And if I'm going to focus on the individual, where does the change need to happen? It's going to be in the prefrontal cortex. So everything we're going to talk about will be translated ultimately here, understood here, translated here, and hopefully this is where change occurs. You will, it'll leave an impact. So the journey today, we start off with burnout, the definition, the consequences. The second part is emotional intelligence in medicine and how it ties. Third part is about self-care and wellness in medicine. And today we'll end up with that third part. The fourth part would be leadership in medicine. And then finally, the fifth part will be coaching in medicine. And then we'll tie it up with some tools and take-home messages and feedbacks and so on and so forth. That's our journey, okay? So we're going to walk it, if you will. Now, because I'm asking you to change, there are two ways that, well, we change according to different factors, if you will. The modus operandi of all of us, almost all of us, especially as physicians, but this is something we talk to with if you have children or yourselves. How do we ask people to change? What do we tell them usually? Somebody comes in, let me give you a scenario. Somebody comes in, they're obese, they're COPD, they're diabetic, they're hypertensive, they just had their heart attack or they're about to have a heart attack and they're sitting there and you tell them this is your result and now you want them to change their lifestyle. So what do you tell them? We appeal to their motivation for change. We can talk, yes, but how do you do that? How do you motivate people to change? What do you tell them? Especially in medicine. Yes, Cody.
Extreme cases, you tell them, you know, you're going to die if you don't change.
Perfect. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. You tell your kids the same thing. If you don't do this, you're going to time out. You tell yourself, New Year's resolution, I'm going to exercise every day. I'm going to make that resolution at 8 o'clock and at 8:30, I break my resolution. Because what we're using is something called extrinsic motivation. The if, then go to. It's fear, it's external motivation. It's change happening because I have to do it or else I suffer consequences. And we know that doesn't work. Because how many of you, if you have patients already, how many of you have 100% compliance from your patients? Yeah. So if I'm going to ask you to change, what do I have to rely on? Well, here's Charlie Brown telling Snoopy, you know, someday we will all die, Snoopy. Yes. Nobody's response is true, but on all the other days, we will not. Simple. One looks here, the other one looks there. So what I want you to do is look inside. If we were going to change, I want you to change because of intrinsic motivation. You're going to want to change because you want to change, because the reward of change is in itself enough. I don't have to be threatened. I want to do it for its sake. So intrinsic motivation, performing a task primarily for its own sake, is the most powerful way to change behavior. So my challenge now is, how do I make what we're going to talk about strong enough, intrinsically strong enough for you guys to say, 3 weeks down the line, 3 years down the line, 15 years down the line, you're going to look up and say, why am I doing this again? Aha, I remember. Okay. Now you've all probably heard about burnout, but what is burnout? Well, before 2019, burnout was kind of a descriptive syndrome, if you will, or state. But as of 2019, it is now a disease. It has its own ICD-11 code, right? And it is a disease. It's a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress. How many of you have chronic workplace stress? I'm raising both hands. I don't know about you, but if you don't have, I want to know. Yeah, thank you. That has not been successfully managed. There are 3 dimensions to burnout, and if you have any of those dimensions, you are burnt out. Feeling of energy depletion. Please raise your hand if you've ever felt energy depletion in your work. Right? Increased mental distance from one's job, or feeling of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. How many of you are cynical? If you don't say you're cynical, you're being cynical. This is how we survive. We're cynical. Okay, the third part is reduced professional efficacy. If you have any one of these, you're suffering from burnout. So I'll ask again, how many of you think that they are burnt out? Yeah, probably. Now, when we say burnout, it doesn't mean like we're always there, and you'll see what I mean. The issue with burnout, though, is it's an occupational phenomenon. It's not like depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. You take the person out of that workplace stress, and there's a good chance they'll stop being burned out. So keep that in mind. Now, there are 12 stages of burnout, according to 2 psychologists that I don't want to destroy their names. And again, if any one of these stages resonates with you, you will probably understand, yes, I have been burnt out. First of all, compulsion to prove oneself. Hello, medical school. Or even before medical school. Number 2, working hard with an inability to switch off. Neglecting basic needs, lack of sleep, lack of healthy eating, lack of social interactions, not showering for a few days, but who cares? Eating junk foods for a week because I have to. Pizza's good on day 10. Displacement of conflicts. Problems are dismissed, especially, and these start off usually with the ones that are closest to us. Your significant other will start sounding the alarm when you start dismissing. Revision of values. Values are skewed. Friends and family dismissed, and hobbies become irrelevant. Denial of emerging problems. I'm not irritable. Why do you call me irritable? How does it seem that I'm irritable? Withdrawal. Social life small or non-existent. Odd behavioral changes, which again, your family first starts to see them. Depersonalization, seeing neither self nor others as valuable. How many times have you thought or said, I don't care? I'm so exhausted, I just don't care. Inner emptiness. Depression. And finally, the burnout syndrome includes mental and physical collapse. Medical attention is required. You'll see why. These are the 12 stages, and at any one point, we are moving in those 12 stages. Now, what are some burnout causes? In the 1970s, Christina Maslach, who coined the term burnout, or the Maslach burnout inventory, is a way to test for burnout. She says all of burnout is usually because of 3 things. Whatever the category, whatever the cause is, it falls into one of these 3 categories: unmet expectations, lack of control, and insufficient rewards. Okay. With research, we've kind of defined it and fine-tuned it a little bit more. Here's what we know. Here's what else contributes to burnout: leadership. I'll show you how, or lousy leadership. Purpose and need, and I'll show you how and what that means. Personal characteristics, lack of self-care and wellness. And under all of this, there's something that very few professions, jobs, situations in life that operate under more pressure than us. And we're going to dissect this diagram. Lack of control, unmet expectations, insufficient rewards. If you can give me a few things at your work or at the hospital that drive you insane, what would they be? Give me an example. All right, yes, Cody.
The computers in the EMR.
MR. Anybody else?
Time it takes to room patients sometimes.
Time it takes to what? Sorry.
Room patients feels like
Yeah.
it slows you down with
Yes.
documentation.
Yeah, absolutely. How about the time that you guys have to interact with patients? Is that adequate usually? No. Okay. If you look at the literature, and Medscape may send you some of these things all the time, like, all right, top 10 reasons why physicians are burned out. Here they are. EMR, feeling like a cog in a wheel, too many hours at work, insufficient monetary funds, emphasis on profits, not patients, severity of illnesses, acuity of situations, increased physical, mental, and emotional demands. You take any one of these and you can put them into those categories. But enter COVID, and it magnified. So there's now lack of PPE. People didn't sign up for this, putting our lives at risk, cannot control the public, cannot control the virus. Pay is less, jobs are lost, risking our loved ones' physical, mental, and emotional separations. So you see how that is magnified. Now I want you to think about every cause of burnout, okay, as a hammer swinging into your prefrontal cortex. Might be a little bit graphic, but I use that. I have lots of ulterior reasons and motives you will see as we go along. But every one of these will impact your prefrontal cortex. Now, let me take a pause and go back to how we make a physician, if you will. The student or resident or fellow, they enter into med school. They go through training and education. They have to fulfill ACGME competencies. And when they do, voila, they are supposed to connect to the purpose and need. And here you are as a physician. This is the cycle. This is in theory what has to happen. So if you remember that medicine arose out of the primal sympathy of man with man, out of the desire to help. This brings us to the crux of the purpose of medicine. All human beings interact with each other on 3 axes or 3 levels: emotions, behavior, cognition. These are the 3 levels we interact with, okay? And if the purpose of medicine is that primal sympathy, and if you look at emotions and behavior, that means we need to, or the purpose is to connect and treat patients. If you look at emotions and cognition, the purpose is to connect and diagnose. And if you look at cognition and behavior, that purpose becomes to diagnose, treat, and ultimately help. That's what we're supposed to do, and that's how we're supposed to graduate. That's how we connect to the purpose of medicine. Now, how does that translate into our brain, and why is that important? If you guys are hungry and you go and eat something, you trigger the mesolimbic or reward pathway. Hungry, ate, satisfied, happy. If you're hungry and you stay hungry, well, you know how you become grouchy, grumpy. You've seen the commercials. What if I told you that when you connect with your patient on all 3 levels and treat and diagnose, that there's another reward that is triggered, reward pathway that is triggered in your brain? And this we know recent, 2-3 years. It turns out that for some people, empathy or sympathy is primal. They need to have it. And so we go back to that definition of primal sympathy. The need to help is as important as the need to eat, which is shocking. We didn't know that before. If your friends ever asked you the question, I don't know how you do it, and if you ever tried to figure out how did I survive med school and go through all of this, it is because the need for you to do that is primal. So you were born, and as you were born and developed and evolved, this drove you to help people. And every time you help someone and connect with them on all three axes, that reward pathway is triggered. Take a moment now and remember when you were able to diagnose someone, that you figured it out, gave the appropriate treatment, and then that patient or their family member hugged you and thanked you for doing that. I want you to take a moment and remember that experience and what it felt like. The moment you say, aha, I knew it. It's a PE, whatever. I gave the medicine, patient's improving. You see it. And the joy that it gave you. That moment, that connection that we have, that reward pathway is so important to our existence. So when it's triggered, you are the most engaged, the best physician, human being you can ever be. Now, what is the need? All human beings have usually three basic needs. And again, depends on which need theory, but they are pretty much the same. We all need to feel competent. We all need to be autonomous, and we all need to have relatedness. And I say need. It's not a want, it's a need. And if you are competent and autonomous, but you cannot relate, they don't compensate for that relatedness. So something is always going to be missing. And how does that translate as a physician? We need to be empathetically connected to our patients and our family members. We need it. We need to feel clinically competent. We put all this effort. We need to feel clinically competent. And then we need to be professionally autonomous. If I was to pause there and say, okay, now where you are in your life on a professional level, how much of your needs are being satisfied? It's just food for thought. What I have noticed from my presentations, and again, I have been fortunate to be doing this for 7 years, and I've done it here and internationally. It always has the same impact with people because it's food for thought. Now I'm going to show you our first video, and if the sound is good, just a thumbs up, okay? You hear? All right, let me fix the sound. There we go. How about now?
Most of us think we're pretty observant, but with a bit of mind control, I wanted to see if I could make these people take even the most obvious things for granted.
Excuse me, do you know how to get to Trinity Church from here?
Yeah. You see that church down there?
Yep, straight through there.
And then you keep going down.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, which way?
You see where that church is down there?
Yeah.
You stay on that, which is, I believe, Broadway. And then you walk down 2 or 3 blocks and Trinity Church is on the right-hand side. We're walking in that direction.
Excuse me, you don't know where Trinity Church is, do you?
Might be Wall Street and Broadway.
Okay. Well, we're down here somewhere, aren't we?
Yeah, you see Trinity Church.
Oops, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. Inside the Trinity Church. Right there. Yeah. If you keep going that way, you'll hit Broadway, then you go down a couple of blocks. And,
Thanks very much.
That seemed almost too easy, so later on I see how far I can take it.
Excuse me, do you know where Trinity Church is?
It's in that direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last time I switched with someone who looked a little bit like me, but where's the fun in that?
Excuse me. Thank you.
You know who best direct you? The other side. You see where that lady's standing?
Sure.
That's the pool. No, the lady in the gray.
the other side.
Yeah, the other side of the
But you
pool.
say you don't know where it is?
Exactly what street, no, but it's in that direction.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you.
Excuse me. Do you know where Trinity Church is from here?
Yeah, fine. Come on, I'll take you. Or you want to walk now?
I'm gonna catch some other people.
Sorry, guys. future.
So
Okay,
you're
listen,
saying-
once you go on Broadway,
Yes.
remember the numbers are going. I could have sworn it was another guy. Once you hit the Broadway, you're going down.
Yes.
Walk up
So
straight that way and just walk straight down. You're gonna
Brilliant.
see it. It's right. It's really brown.
That's brilliant. Thanks for your help.
All right, fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Excuse me. You know where Trinity Church is? Ah, great. Where are we on here? We sort of there.
We're right here.
Right through, thank you.
Go on. We are the Brooklyn Bridge. You want to cross over there, go down Broadway, and you'll be right there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, comments?
I didn't notice that the first time that the people changed, only with the bald guy and then the woman.
I'm sorry, Ayana, repeat what you said. There was a breakup.
I said I didn't notice that the first couple of times he was asking that he was changing.
Oh, okay.
The guy was bald, and then with the woman.
But why didn't you notice?
I don't know. I didn't pay attention.
What got your attention?
When he mentioned that he was going to switch with someone who looked a little bit different than him.
No,
And I was
but
like, oh,
before
they've been
that-
switching.
Oh, so before that, what were you focusing on?
I thought that the painting like kind of looked, I thought that the point was like the painting kind of looked like him. And
All right.
so, yeah.
So of all of the people, who did you notice was the first person to actually notice that, hey, I thought there was another guy? It was the African-American person, right? He's like, I could have, he paused and said, I could have sworn. He also said, here, come, I'll take you, right? So this highlights what exactly? What do you think people, why do you think people didn't notice who they were talking to? What were they focusing on? Yes, Heather?
They were focusing on the map and giving, I guess, accurate directions.
So they're focusing on the problem.
Mhm.
There's something here, they need to solve it, right? How many of you have called your patients by their diagnoses? How many of you have said, I got to see OPD here? I've got an appendicitis.
Not
I
to their
repeat.
face.
What?
Probably not to their face, but definitely in conversation with colleagues.
Yes. So hey, I've got an interesting case. I've got a ruptured appendix. Really? How does it look like sitting in bed? The point of this is when you go into med school, the first thing we teach you is we're going to tell you, take your emotions and bottle them up. Because as a physician, you can't have emotions. Your patients will dream. You have to be cognitive all the time, and you can't worry about your emotions and be crying with the patient. So you have to always stay focused and in control. And we effectively change the I-thou relationship into the I-it relationship. Now we have you focus on the problem. A problem that through medical training, and if you look at the literature, it says, in medical training and medical practice, empathy is gradually eroded and lost. Patients are viewed as liabilities, not assets. So let's backtrack here. All your life, you've got this primal sympathy and you want to help. And now when you have the opportunity, the first thing we tell you is remove that sympathy. But it's my driving force. Yes, but it'll get you in trouble in medicine, remove it. If anybody's seen the movie Patch Adams, it's kind of like the same thing. And if not, it's a good movie to watch. It's like saying, I've been hungry all my life and I finally found the food. Yes, but you cannot taste it. What that does is it starts messing up with our brain. Now we're trying to rewire our brain, say, all right, this primal sympathy, this primal need that I have to be empathetically connected, I have to destroy it. I have to actively destroy it. Now you enter with COVID and, oh, let me really be distant from my patient. I work in the ER, so this would be a usual scene every day, right? So let me put more physical distance. I already don't look at my patient. I think of them as a case. And let's graduate to even more. How about we just put you in front of a screen and this is how we're going to treat you. And I need you to remember what Hippocrates says. He says it is more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. Does that make sense? That's part of who we are. So in our first part of our training, let's eliminate that. Let's take the second part. Remember, it's emotion, cognition, and behavior. So look, we've eliminated the emotional part. We train you to eliminate it. Now let's talk about cognition. When you go into med school, pre-med, you're focused really on studying and getting to med school. When you're into med school, the first few years, depending on your program, you're studying, you're learning, you're studying, you're learning, and then you start seeing patients. And with that comes everything else, whether it's the EMR or listening to the nurses or bedding or things out of your control. And then things you have to worry about, and licensing and so on and so forth. And then you graduate, and then you've got all of these things to worry about. What that does is it creates something we call cognitive scarcity. Cognitive scarcity means one brain, multiple hats, or one head, multiple hats. Do you ever feel like you're always solving problems? Is your mind always doing this? Are you always moving to the next? If somebody shows up, a significant other or friend who says, hey, you know what, I had a flat tire today, and your mind goes, all right, well, there's this discount tire over there, and if you do this, then you can do it that way, and if you do that, then you can do it, and they look at you like, I don't need you to tell me, I fixed the problem. I'm just sharing, and in your mind, it's like, well, why are you wasting my time? If it's already solved, why tell it to me in the first place? I mean, if you don't need my help, why? And so that kind of confuses us, because now our brain is always, what's next? And if somebody, how many of you hate when somebody complains and you just want to either do something about it or be quiet? I don't want to hear it. Don't sit there and nag about something without actually trying to fix it. What's the purpose? Okay, this is cognitive scarcity. Draws cognitive resources that prefrontal cortex already got a hammer from our emotional state to urgent demands. And if it's not urgent or emergent, it can wait. It induces impairments in other domains like ability to, how many of you think of yourself as great listeners? Yeah, we've got the attention span of a goldfish. You go and ask your patient, if they don't spit it out within 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 18 seconds, it's an eternity. Which leads to counterproductive behaviors and mistakes, irritability, anger, disdain, lack of feeling appreciated, you're wasting my time, and so on and so forth, which leads back to cognitive scarcity. Now you add COVID on top of that. On quarantine, if you got kids at home and homeschool and job losses, economic, political, social change, everything that you have to deal with, and then possibility of getting infected, infecting loved ones, voila, this is where you get now so much. The second hammer on your prefrontal cortex drops. Okay, well, let's talk about the behavior. To study the phenomena of disease without books is to sail uncharted sea, while to study books without patients is to not to go to sea at all. What does that mean? How much time do residents spend with their patients on average? And I'm going to say this is internal medicine residents. I'm not going to talk pathology because, they're not. Internal medicine, my training is internal medicine, so I will tell you how important it is to sit down and examine your patient and listen to them. What do you think the percentage of time on a daily basis do residents spend with their patients? Throw a number.
10%.
Thank you, Ayan. That seems awfully low, don't you think?
20 minutes.
It's 9.4%. 51% is spent on the computer. We're graduating physicians who are excellent with a space bar and an enter. I may not read the patient, but good Lord, I'm a mean typist. Are you kidding me? I mean, less than 10% of your time you're spending with the patients? And we expect you to understand patients and treat patients and diagnose patients. And here's the other thing. Our brain, because we need to be competent, our brain measures our success by the ability to treat and diagnose and treat. It's part of, again, our purpose and need. The problem, though, is people measure your success mostly by your bedside manners. It doesn't mean that you have to be rude when talking to somebody, no. But if you are a surgeon and you chop off the wrong leg, but you are very nice about it, chances are you will be sued less and people will complain less than if you were a surgeon who saved somebody's life but has the bedside of a porcupine. It doesn't compute in our brain. But that's where we're at. When they measured how people complain, 43% included complaints about poor bedside manner when it came to physicians. And 21.5% included complaints about medical skills such as false diagnosis and surgical mistakes. It messes with our brains. I am here spending an eternity of my life to try to help you. And I am getting rewarded or recognized or ridiculed or what have you, not based on my clinical competence. And then with the COVID world, well, let me again distance myself. There's decreased bedside rounding. There's decreased patient interactions. There's doing our best with little impact on outcome. And it just gets worse. So let's go back to how we have eroded purpose and need. So removing the emotions, remove the essence of medicine by inhibiting emotions and decreasing empathy. In that triangle of relationship between physician and patient, let us remove the ability to connect. So we don't need to be empathetically connected. Step 2, occupy the cognition with non-medical tasks and responsibilities. So let's remove or impair our ability to diagnose, right? So we don't have to be professionally autonomous in our abilities, and we have to rely on algorithms and other things. Step 3, evaluate behavior not based on medical and clinical judgment and performance, but on customer service, pay for performance, and metric attainment. So let us remove the ability to treat and help and feel clinically competent. I reached the sepsis protocol bundle within time, but I killed the patient because they were having CHF. The whole system has changed. So let's go back to this diagram. Here you are, you're hungry, right? You eat something, there's a buffet, you pour yourself a ton of food, you sit down, you eat. When you're done with eating, and you're still hungry. Same as when you started, actually you're hungry because time has passed. So you go up and fill that buffet and bring it back down and eat again. And you're getting hungrier and crankier. No matter how many times you fill out that plate, you're still gonna get hungry. This is exactly what happens in our brain. So when we go through everything we've gone through, we have effectively destroyed our relationship with the patient. That's just through medical training and the way our practice is. Which means no matter how many patients you help, that limbic pathway or that the reward pathway that's attached to that pathway is not triggered. And so instead of seeing 10 patients a day, now we have to see 30 patients a day, and 30 times we're going to try, and 30 times that reward pathway is not going to be triggered, or maybe 29. This is when you get burnout. So now we went through the lack of control, unmet expectations, those 3 categories. And now we went through, and now we've covered purpose and need and how that contributes. So the new challenge of medicine then is, within where we are, how are we able to solve these problems? Okay, how can we reconnect? Because you have to remember that burnout cannot exist where purpose lives. So if we're able, at the end of these presentations, to help you reconnect with your purpose and live your purpose, not just reconnect, actually live it, I can guarantee you that you are going to be more immune to burnout than anybody else. Now, if you remember, there's also personal characteristics. And what are some of the personal characteristics that lead to burnout? Being self-critical. How many of you are self-critical? How many of you pat yourself on the back every day? Hey, job well done. We don't even know what that looks like. You can say yes if you got something right. And that lasts about 0.2 seconds. Matching the personality of the specialty. It's a new wave in medicine that some schools are doing it. Not everybody can be a family physician, not everybody can be a surgeon or obstetrician. Engaging in unhelpful coping strategies. What's the number one or one of the top coping mechanisms of physicians when they have a ton of work? How do they face that? What do they do? They work some more. In our mind, if 13 hours a day didn't do it, I'm going to work 15. I'll stay up all night if I have to. Perfectionism, the expectation from ourselves, from our teaching, from the public, from the essence of helping people is we have to be perfect. Idealism, the ideal world of practicing medicine. Certain personality types can affect positively or negatively. If you are OCD, and we all have some OCDness in us, good luck. And then racism in the workplace, whether it's against you or for you. And when COVID-19 came, it accelerated those personal characteristics, kind of brought them even more. If you're able to hide some of them, you can't. Now let's talk about pressure. Pressure is different from stress. Stress is transient. Pressure messes with your brain. It does how? It's where the outcome is important to you. It is uncertain and you are accountable and judged for the results. You must deliver the goods or suffer dire consequences. That's pressure. That's what we live for under every single day. You probably look at people and sometimes like, oh, I'm stressed. You know, I'm going to be late for 30 minutes or something in their life. It stresses them. And you look at them and you say, I wish I had your stress. Pressure adversely impacts cognitive success. Again, there's that prefrontal cortex, another hammer hitting it. Downgrades behavioral skills. We've almost become like toddlers. We perform below our capability. It is often camouflaged and is continuously increasing. Whether you've seen it in yourself, or if you've seen it in a colleague, where they react in ways like, you know what, that person really needs a break. You start either cussing people out or throwing things at people, or you've seen it with others doing it, or yelling at patients and families and nurses, or just doing things that are not usually, and then you either in a day or so or even a few hours, like, why did I do this? I don't know who I am anymore. And then with COVID, you can add about 100 tons to the pressure we're working on. I say all of these things, and this is the depressing part of all the presentation, because if you don't know what you are up against, how do I expect you to change? And how do you expect yourself to change? Because make no mistake, we have to change. We cannot continue being where we're at. Leadership. Very interesting from Tate Chanafelt, who's one of the gurus on burnout. This is what he found. Mayo has demonstrated the importance of frontline leadership on the well-being and professional satisfaction of physicians. How much so? They had a 60-point scale of leadership, and they had several hundreds or thousands of physicians. So they tallied them. It's 12 parameters, each parameter scale of 1 to 5. So it's a 60-point scale. And they found that every point upward on a 60-point scale, just 1 point, if you improve your leadership skills in those 12 categories, there was a 9% greater staff satisfaction and 3.3% less burnout. 1 point upwards. That's at the immediate level. On a higher level, at the department and division level, 11% of the variation in burnout and 47% of the variation in satisfaction with the organization was explained by the leadership index of the chairperson. This is how important leadership affects. And all of you are going to be leaders if you are not leaders. All of you are going to lead someone, some group, whether it's your clinic, the nurses, the staff, ER, OR, endoscopy suite, anywhere. And just think about how that reflects your families, your life. There are many ways to describe a physician. Martin Fisher, I think, for the purpose of my presentation, says it best. Observation, reason, human understanding, courage, these make the physician. When you are burnt out, you are disconnected, unrealistic, you can't read clues, and you're checked out. You have decreased ability to analyze. You know that burnout and stress and hijacks and so on and so forth can lower our IQ points by up to 15. So we lose our ability to think and we lose skills. That's where you see surgeons or hear surgeons going, oops. Assess and loss of ability to assess and think, loss of clinical skills. You can't understand or relate to others, loss of empathy. And then you are distant, insecure, you blame others, you're explosive, unpredictable, and aggressive. When hopefully you go back and read, if you can, if you have time, you are going to see yourself along all of these, but sometimes that you have passed through them. But here's the reality of physicians. And again, even though this is from 2014, it stayed about the same. 54% of physicians say they are burnt out, 54. So if you're a patient, chances are 1 out of every 2 physicians who walks into your room is burnt out. 88% of doctors are moderately severely stressed, and 59% of doctors wouldn't recommend a career in medicine to their children. Regardless of what your background is, from the religious standpoint or human standpoint. One of the highest calling as a human being is to be able to help someone else, regardless of your background. It is one of the most noble things, and we dedicate our life to do that. If after we go through this, 60% of us do not want our children to go through the same thing, it should keep you thinking. When diagnosed, the average severity of burnout is about 4.2 out of 5. Remember, I told you we're going through different stages, but on average, when you take somebody and you run the burnout test, on average, they are 4.2 out of 5, which is about a stage 3B in the malignancy cancer staging. So not only 1 out of 2 are burnt out, but they are at that level. That's pretty scary. Projections during and post COVID-19, more burnout, more moral injury, and more will leave the workforce. That's the projection. So if you go back to our oath, whenever a doctor cannot do good, he must be kept from doing harm. If you take that, then half of us should retire today or quit, which will leave the other half for tomorrow. So it's a very somber reality. Here's how somber. Dear mom and dad, I know you may not understand why I didn't seek help. I don't know if I can really explain why, but this choice makes sense to me. I know I had such a seemingly bright future, and I know I would have been such a successful doctor and wife and mother. But all I have ever desperately wished for is to not feel like not existing would be preferable to being who I am and living the life that I live. I love you both so much, your daughter, Caitlin. It's a physician who committed suicide. How many physicians commit suicide every year because of burnout? Do you know? 1 a day. About 350 to 400 physicians every year commit suicide. Think about that. OSHA describes being a physician as one of the most dangerous professions, not work, not lumberjacks and high wire thing. I asked how many doctors have lost a colleague to suicide. All hands were raised. How many have considered suicide? Except for one woman, all hands remained up, including mine. We take an oath to preserve life at all costs while secretly plotting our own deaths. Why? If you now take a step back and see everything that has been happening to your brain while doing this, you might come to the conclusion that, you know what? Because of my poor judgment in patient care decision-making, because of my hostility and medical errors and adverse patient events, because of decreased relationship with workers and disengagement and sleep disturbances and alcohol and broken relationships, so on and so forth, it might be easier just to take my life. And unfortunately, one every day does it. Now, here's the thing. You want to, if you were ever asked, how strong is this primal sympathy that you have? Physicians know that they're being beaten up. We feel it. But when physicians were tallied, they were surveyed, they said, what do you think is the most dangerous thing about burnout is? What do you think physicians' answer was? If you think their answer was suicide, you'll be sorely mistaken. Despite everything they're going through, their first answer was decreased quality of care. I don't know of any group, maybe on an individual level, any group of people who have been abused this much, and more than 60% of them, they say, look, we'll take the abuse, but what we worry about, what keeps us at night, is the quality of care we give. There is no stronger primal sympathy than that. If I took an oath to help people, and I know that I'm suffering for it, and I have the opportunity to do something, and my primary concern isn't me, but it is my patients still, that should tell you something about who you belong to, which workforce you belong to and are part of. And only for that, it should tell you how the strength of that fire inside all of us. All the way down at 8% is physician suicide. 38% effect on the attitude of the rest of the healthcare team. It's all about our patients. That's good and bad at the same time, but for the most part, it's great. And again, there is nothing, no group of people that are as passionate and are driven as we are with that same collective thing. It's something to think about. I talked a little bit about COVID and burnout. But what I've noticed is what I call the MACU effect. And it's through, again, I need to emphasize that none of what I'm presenting to you is a personal opinion. Everything you can find is in literature. All I did was just, some of it is experiments that we've done, some of it is published research, but all of it it's out there. So if you take the burnout factor, the pathophysiology, the signs and symptoms, here was COVID did. First, it magnified the burnout, as we have shown. Second, it accelerated burnout physiology or pathophysiology. Third, it amplified the symptoms, created new ones, and uncovered hidden ones. That's what I call the MACU effect. Now, when COVID first hit, burnout kind of decreased and everybody focused on the task at hand. Helping, PPEs and so on and so forth. We became one unified force. Then with time, that went away about March or April. When with time, here's what happened. Oh, and one of the physicians I interviewed, she was up in New York. She said, I've never felt so useless and so needed at the same time. Think about that as far as the brain is concerned. I want to help, but I can't do anything. And with time, this is where we're at. Burnout is much more. There's moral injury now, and then with the MACU effect. But what is moral injury? And we're almost done with the first part, by the way. Our usual colonoscopy equipment is down today, so we're going to be using a tapeworm with a GoPro strapped to its head. Why do I show that? Because moral injury happens when you compromise your standards. And in medicine, this is how it looks like. It refers to an injury to an individual's moral conscience and values resulting from an act of perceived moral transgression, which produces profound emotional guilt and shame, and in some cases also a sense of betrayal, anger, and profound moral disorientation. When you start saying it's okay, we were given the green light when COVID hit in the ER to not even listen to our patients. Give them an iPad, put them in a room, talk to them. And we can understand that they're short of breath, but I can't be close to them. That was okay. In real life, it's not okay. That doesn't work with that, doesn't compute. That's where moral injury happened. And moral injury is along the same axis as PTSD. It actually shares all of these with them. So on top of burnout and everything we talked about, let me introduce moral injury to you guys, because I guess it's not enough. So you've heard me talk about that we oscillate. Well, this brings us to the two concepts that I want to talk about before moving forward. The pendulum concept. Because we're not always happy and not always sad and so on and so forth, we oscillate between these two things. So burnout is a contagious, malignant existence that sways between minimal and extreme. And the word contagious comes up here. What do you mean contagious? I'll explain what malignant is, but what do you mean contagious? How can this emotional disease be contagious? Well, because emotions are contagious. The most common contagious emotion is what? Yawning. If you've ever been down and you go into a room and everybody is up and laughing, you feel lifted up. But if you're neutral or even a little bit happy and you go into an environment that's toxic, everybody's yelling at everybody, it brings you down. And the thing about burnout, that it is contagious. That pendulum is pushed by, as you see now, personal, professional, emotional, psychosocial, and environmental factors. That decides how the pendulum is pushed. It has the disease, extreme morbidity and mortality consequences on physician and patient alike. There is no disease like burnout. None. that affects the physicians and the patients. It's contagious, it affects both. Think of it as you're walking into a patient's room who just had a bone marrow transplant, they have zero immunity, and you walk in there, you've got tuberculosis, COVID, HIV, flu, pneumonia, strep, whatever, hepatitis, and you cough, you shake their hands, there's blood on your fingers, you shake their hands, they get your blood, then you walk out. Patient dies within what? Same thing. There's never been a disease like this. Now let me explain the malignancy model. What does cancer need to grow? One, it needs environmental and genetic factors. It needs time. And it has a negative cumulative effect, but there's one more thing that cancer needs, and that's our inability to detect it. Same thing with burnout. Moving forward, what if we can intervene in the environmental and genetic factors? What if we can use time to our advantage? What if we develop the ability to detect and fight burnout? And what if we turn time and everything in our life into a positive cumulative change? What if we're able to do that? And the answer is yes, we can do that. But we have to create a new reality. But the issue is our environment, our world is not going to change. Not after this presentation, whenever you're going to go and say, wow, everything now has changed, it's to my advantage. No. So our challenge moving forward is to create that new reality from whatever is out there. In order to do so, we do the AAA approach, which is increase awareness. That's what I've been trying to do. Acknowledgement and assessment, which is not something we will be doing, but you probably acknowledge that, hey, I've got these things. And then take action. And if I was to ask, when is it time to take action? What would be your answer? When do you want to start? Yes. Now. Most interventions that you will read about in literature come here after we're being burnt out. Doesn't make sense. And that's mostly to protect the patient and the hospital and lawsuits and so on and so forth. We need to intervene more here when it still means something to trust me, I'm a doctor. And moving forward, that's where we're going to intervene. Now, the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. How many of you would agree with the following slide? Who wants change? Everybody. Who wants to change? Nobody. Why? Because change requires something called courage. And moving forward, it might seem like we're that penguin, but it's not going to be. So the next 4 presentations are going to talk about our new reality and how we change them. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence, self-care, balance, mindset, resilience, and coaching. And putting all of this into the perspective that makes sense, and then how do you build momentum moving forward? Remember, if change needs to happen in our prefrontal cortex, I need to change life is what happens to me, to life is what I make happen. What do I mean by that? Last week, let me take an example. Last week we got hit with a storm. That's what happened. Okay. But you all intervened and tried to do something with it. Yes. I'll tell you a story. I'll share with you a story. I like to hunt. And every now and then I'll go during the wintertime. So one night I went, this was a few years ago, a very good friend of mine, God rest his soul, his name was Don. And we were walking, we stopped, we have I hunt deer, so there's a tree stand we go to. And it's 5:30 in the morning, it's pitch black, I can't see anything. I've got a cap on that has a little flickering light just for me to see where I'm going. Don is there, I'm here, we're walking. Pitch black, all you see is this little light, that's it, and I can barely see what's in front of me, but that's what. We get to the point, there's a clearing, and then there's a line of trees, and beyond that, we have to walk in about 50, 100 yards to get to the tree stand. About 5 or 6 feet before we got to that tree line, we hear something grumble, growl. And it was about maybe from that tree line, if we're 6 feet here, it was probably about 12 feet to the other side of that tree line. And that thing stood up. And when it stood up, I realized at the time, A, it's much bigger than me. B, it's angry. And C, it probably, will make breakfast out of me. And as soon as I heard that, I turned to start running. And my philosophy, of course, is I need to outrun it. And as soon as I was doing that, Don grabbed me by my forehand and he says, "What are you doing?" And in my mind, what do you think I'm doing? He says, "Hold, just stop." So here I am, I've got one bullet in the chamber. I'm doing this. You'll see the light flickering because right now I'm not the strongest person or the bravest person in the world. And this thing is moving towards us and I can hear it breathe. And it gets to the point where it's behind that tree line and I'm hearing it now. All it has to do is pounce and we're done. And then it decides to walk into the woods. After it does that, I turned around to Don and I said, why'd you, he looked at me, says, "What do you think you were doing?" I said, I was turning around and to run. He says, "Yes. But if you turn your back and run, what are the chances of you being able to defend yourself against that thing?" 0. I was just going to hit you from the back, put you down, bite you in your neck, you're done. If you stand and face it, you have a chance. At that moment, Don created a mindset shift in me. And he allowed me to change my mindset from, okay, life is coming at me, I need to cope, to what can I do? And moving forward, when you accept that you need to change, you have to develop the mindset to change it. So we talked about why we need to change, because we're getting destroyed left and right. The purpose to change is there, our primal sympathy. Now we have to develop the mindset. And what's the importance of mindset? Because when you look at your life and all the challenges in front of it, you're going to say, "You know what, Doc, this is great, wonderful, but it really can't be done. You don't know my life. You don't know what I have." Mindset is a set of beliefs or a way of thinking that determines one's behavior, outlook, and mental attitude. Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So to share with you the story of a mindset and the importance of it, and to tell you, yes, it can be done. There are people who are doing it. But you have to develop the belief. How many of you know the story of the quarter mile? The 4-minute mile, do you know it? If you don't, here's the story of the 4-minute mile and the importance of mindset. Here's our second video.
Before April 1954, the common belief, the universal belief, because it had been tried again and again and again and people had failed, the belief was that man was not physically capable of breaking the 4-minute barrier, that he could not run a mile in less than 4 minutes. That was the belief on the planet. It had never been done. But here's what happened, ladies and gentlemen. Roger Bannister came along, and he broke the 4-minute barrier. Now, here's what's significant about that. Since that time, up to this day, over 20,000 people have done it, including high school kids. What changed? 20,000 people. What changed? Here's what happened when they got on the track. They knew it had been done. And because they knew it had been done, there was a new belief about this barrier, about this goal that was unreachable. And those 20,000 people got in a race believing, knowing in their heart that someone had done it, that it's possible, that they could do it. And I'm saying that if you know anybody that had some goal, some dream, something they wanted to do, and they did it, then I'm saying that you know in your heart that if someone has done it, then you can do it. It's possible. And that if someone can make their dream become a reality, that it's possible that you can make your dream become reality. And so as you begin to look at where you want to go, beginning to embrace that, it's possible. I'm blessed and highly favored I've got a lot going for me. I got some good stuff in me. And it's possible that I can bring my greatness out here in the universe.
So how do you know if you have the right mindset or you need to change your mindset? If you continuously focus on what is wrong, you'll probably need to change your mindset. You mourn your failures without celebrating your success. You don't want to face the truth. You get angry when your expectations are not met. You feel unsatisfied or unhappy with everything you have. You're constantly fighting with the ones you care about. You think about what you have to do and not what you get to do. You see yourself as a victim and you hold on to others' dreams. If you have these things, then it's a good idea to take a look, and you might want to change your mindset. So on an individual level, since we're going to talk about individuals, what has worked so far? And when we talk about burnout, people think, oh God, it's so complicated. It's not. Because if you focus solely on the problem, you might actually miss the easy solution. So going through the literature, I will focus on these 5 things: the individual targeted approaches, developing position leadership, coaching, resilience development training, self-care, wellness, and emotional intelligence. This will be the end of our first presentation, first session. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. We'll take about 5 or 10 minute break and then we'll come back. It's 12:12, so probably 12:20, if that's okay with everybody. Do you have any questions? Reflections, thoughts? All right, I will see you at 12:20. Okay.